When the host decides to catch Melania on her past decisions, he does not expect such a turn. From her cold but powerful attacks to the way she made him doubt his usual words, this episode shocked the country. Never before has anyone seen Melania so confident and ruthless. Don't miss how she destroys all attempts of the host to manipulate her in this way. Watch till the end to see how this moment goes viral and changes everything. The interview with Melania Trump began like any other evening. The host, a seasoned and confident man with a sly smile and sparkling eyes, sat across from the former First Lady, telling her that everything was under control. He thought it would be just another warm interview that would quickly fade into oblivion. But he was completely unprepared for what was to follow. Melania sat across from him, radiating calm and confidence. She looked like someone who not only knew what she was saying, but also what was coming next. There was no hint of nervousness in her eyes, no fear or desire to please. Everything was perfect. She was there to be, and that was just the way she was, the girl. The host began with a simple question, especially since the show was known for its good-natured atmosphere. Melania, tell us how you are living after the White House. She exhaled, smiled a little, and calmly replied, "Life goes on. I'm just not in the spotlight anymore, and that's probably better for me. I can focus on personal projects and what's important to my family." The host seemed to expect a more emotional state, but nothing happened. He noticed that her face was like an ice sculpture, impenetrable and merciless. It threw him off a bit, but he quickly pulled himself together. Hosts like him cope with the fact that their questions provoke an explosion of emotion or, albeit, much greater uncertainty in the answers. But this was different. Undeterred, he asserts, many people have noticed that your Be Better program has not gained the popularity of other First Lady initiatives. You could be more active, especially in terms of public events. Why is that? He says this with a hint of mockery, as if he already knew the answer, or rather, as if he was sure that this would be a good pretext for attack. He is ready to make her vulnerable. But Melania, instead of falling into his trap, merely raised an eyebrow. Her eyes grew a little colder. She was in no hurry to answer, and all that was left was to prolong the moment a little. The tension in the studio became palpable. My program may not have been as big as others, but you forget that change doesn't always have to be in the public eye. The important thing is that it's gradual, and I'm proud that I've been able to help so many people without drawing too much attention to myself. She spoke calmly, but there was a determination in her voice that startled his host. He tried to find luck because she was just avoiding the truth, but his confidence began to waver. The leader, not used to such persistence, tried to regain control. He leaned forward a little, intending to attack again, but he felt that it would not be so easy. He was ready for aggression, but he met an icy wall of resistance. But you should have been more involved in events, showing that you were really working. Why wasn't that the case? He said sarcastically again, expecting Melania to break down. He thought that her calm would soon give in to his pressure. Melania's response was a cold shower. You think only the big actions matter? What about all the stuff that's been done behind the scenes? I believe that true power doesn't always come from the big actions. Her answer was so powerful and strong that the host couldn't find the words right away. He was trapped by natural expectations. The room was heating up, and she still sat there, not changing her facial expression, not rushing to react. She knew exactly how to keep the situation under control. The host, trying to regain his position, continued to look at her with distrust. He no longer knew how to react. Each of his questions bounced off her like a bullet off a bulletproof vest. The studio was silent, and everyone was the same. Melania Trump had just set the rules of the game. The host, realizing this, felt his confidence slipping away. The interview grew more tense with each word. The host was determined to get Melania Trump to open up, but his provocations were beginning to wear thin. He thought that by raising questions about her Be Better initiative, he could tease her, show that she was not as proactive as other First Ladies. But his actions only made things worse. Leaning slightly, the host tries to attack again. His voice has become more mocking, almost pointing out shortcomings. Melania, many people think that your program, Be Better, has never left a noticeable mark. Why didn't you show more excitement, weren't in the foreground? His words were no longer just interesting, but a manifestation of responsibility. Melania, as always, remained calm. She sat with perfect posture, as if she were above it all. That look that immediately said that she was not going to give in. She slowly bowed her head. Her expression did not change, but there was a coldness in her eyes that could be felt even if they were on opposite sides of the room. My program was not about reaping the fruits. It was not a show, it was a real step towards change. Often I, who look for loud events, do not understand that real change is always slow, behind the scenes, she answered, without breaking her voice. But her words struck the host like a bolt of lightning. The host paused for a moment. He felt that economic control. The answer was too sharp and abrupt not to be distinguished, but his pride was not a sign of recognition that Melania was right. He continued to press, trying to regain the advantage. But still, how do you explain that your style of work was not as public as that of other first ladies? Surely you could have been more visible. Isn't it worthwhile to earn support through public actions? He offered again, but this time with a hint of doubt about her true motives. Melania leaned back calmly in her chair and, looking him straight in the eye, said, "Publicity does not always mean openness. I know what I did to whom, and I need it. It was seen. I do not need approval from those who try to criticize me for not meeting someone's standards." The host was not prepared for this turn of events. He wanted Melania to justify herself, but she not only refused, she ordered him that his opinion did not matter. At this point, the host felt that his questions had become empty. His position was beginning to waver. He tried to threaten, trying to find some weak spot, but her words called into question everything he said. "So you're saying there was no pressure, you want to act like others?" She tried to press him again, but there was already an uncertain tremor in his voice. Melania pursed her lips and replied with a slight reproach, "Why should I be like others? I did what was considered necessary. Pressure from others has never been my guide. My path is my choice." The answer sounded like the final touch. The host froze. That it was no longer possible to return the equal conversation to his side. Melania not only did not give in, she put him in his place, and the whole hall felt her strength and confidence. The silence in the studio was almost palpable. The audience began to realize that this woman was not just a former first lady, but a real figure who did not allow herself to be manipulated. The host realized that he would not be able to undermine her calm. He was in front of someone who did not need recognition and other people's opinions. The room, filled with tension, felt this moment. Everyone understands. Melania has just won, and this was not just an interview. This was a guy in whom she once again showed her genuine strength. The host felt his attempt to provoke Melania begin to lose its force. He could not think at the time how calmly she held herself, not giving in to his manipulations. He, a veteran of the media space, was used to celebrities giving in sooner or later, but this was a different story. Melania was not going to give in. Unable to accept that her answers are undermining his script, the host decides to change tactics. He pauses again, holding back his irritation, and tries to change the tone of the conversation. He decides that if he can't throw her off by asking why she hasn't been more visible at public events, he'll attack her role as First Lady. "So, we've reached the point where you prefer to remain in the shadows. But how do you explain that your overall style of work has been so secretive? Surely you could use that status to speak up in public opinion, to be more visible than other First Ladies." His voice grew increasingly sarcastic, as if he already knew that this would be an unfortunate answer for her. He was ready to withdraw from the world, that Melania was not the kind of person to stand on a pedestal. Melania didn't miss a beat, and she answered with such ease that her words seemed not only logical, but also backed by an invisible force. "You probably think that status and publicity are the only way to change things. But for me, other values are more important. My job was not to get attention, but to actually do things that can change people's lives and not just put on a show for TV." Her words were lightning fast and to the point, and the host felt the ground shift from under his feet. He expected her to be confused, but instead she came out with a direct, confident statement that left no room for doubt. Melania spoke as if she alone knew what to do, and everyone else was just an audience. The studio audience froze, realizing that this response was not just a defense, it was a counterattack. The host, desperate to regain some control, asked, "But how can you say your silence was effective? The whole world was watching you, and you didn't take that chance to make a real difference. Don't you want to be remembered as the First Lady who made a difference?" His words now sounded like a complaint, and it couldn't escape the attention of the audience. Melania bowed her head, her face becoming even more motionless. She reacted like an experienced chess player who has already seen all the moves of his opponent. To be remembered is not my goal. I do not live to please those who believe that public life should be bright and noisy. My work has always been for people, not for show. If I followed their expectations, I would never do anything new." The host, already noticeably less confident, now felt forced to fight for every inch of territory. His attack was once again falling apart. Melania not only undermined his arguments, but also asked a question he did not know how to answer. What was more important, being visible or being active? Each of her answers sounded like a weapon that penetrated his defenses. She showed that true power lies not in publicity, but in action. The audience couldn't help but notice how powerless all the leader's questions were. He tried to seize control, but with each new answer, Melania was not just defending herself. She was putting him in an awkward position. The audience had already begun to feel how she was winning, and all attention was riveted to her imperturbable figure, which confidently led the conversation where she wanted. His face became tense, his voice creaky. He did not know how to get back into the game. Melania, as before, sat straight, not allowing the slightest hesitation. She is unchangeable, that only calmness gives her real strength. This moment was key. She did not only check the questions, she broke the whole system of imposing public expectations. The host, now almost completely out of confidence, was desperate to regain some measure of control in the interview. He had expected her composure to break down sooner or later, but with each new answer, Melania Trump became more and more untouchable. Her calm was such that it literally struck a chord with him. Now he decided that he needed to act on the principle of moving into more aggressive territory. But then something unexpected happened. He quickly changed tactics, pretending that he had been asking explanatory questions all along. His voice became confident again, almost accusing. "Okay, Melania, we understand your position, but let's be frank. You couldn't help but notice that, as a first lady, there were books expected of you. Why don't you try to follow them? Why wasn't there an opportunity to be more publicly active? Every other first lady was in the spotlight and making big statements." Melania looked at him calmly, as if she was not touched by his words. She did not even hold back the slightest irritation. "I do not live to live up to other people's expectations. I live to be myself, not who someone wants me to be." Her voice was like ice that froze everything around her. And although her words sounded soft, they penetrated the air, leaving the host at a loss. He had obviously hoped that he could undermine her confidence, but instead she not only defended herself, but also began to attack his expectations. "Do you really think that publicity is the only way to prove your originality?" she said with almost philosophical calm, a question she seemed to ask anyone who tried to understand her. The host froze. His confidence began to fade. He thought he could get around her resilience, but she tore his arguments apart every time. He was used to a celebrity or politician sitting in her place, trying to justify themselves, proving their worth through achievements that were easily measurable and understandable to the public. Melania was different. "You don't understand that real strength isn't about shouting and noise. Strength is about staying calm when everyone around you is trying to take over. Strength is about going your own way, even when the whole world is telling you to go the other way," she continued, not raising her voice, but her words were sharp and hard, like hammers. This answer came as a real shock to the host. He tried to return to the conversation about how her silence could be taken as a lack of action, but Melania quickly put an end to his manipulations. "You want me to shout so that everyone can see me working? No. My work has always been about changing people's lives, not creating a picture for television," she said with such confidence that the host didn't know what to say. He tried not to show his confusion, but his eyes betrayed his support for the initiative. The room had clearly begun to perceive her as the winner. The host felt that the pressure on him was not producing results. His questions were becoming more and more confused and uncertain, and her answers were becoming more and more brilliant and subtle. He realized that no matter how much he tried to irritate her, she was always one step ahead. Melania noticed how slowly the host shifted. He no longer looked like the master of the situation. Now he was just trying to keep up appearances, not to cause his disappointment in the future. But it was too late. She had made him inappropriate for his observer. And it was at that moment that everything became clear. Melania Trump had not just survived his questions. She had prevailed over him with restraint and fortitude, so as not to provoke his aggression to touch her. The silence in the studio was deafening. The audience felt like each answer revealed a new facet of her power. Melania had not only put him in his place, she had shown everyone how to beat a fighter without raising her voice or stooping to the level of manipulation. The host no longer knew what to do. All he could do was watch his show turn into a disaster for him. After several groups of the host provoked Melania, it became obvious that he was trapped. His questions were losing their power, and he no longer knew how to fight back. Melania, with her unshakable calm, not only defended, but also counterattacked, putting the host in conditions that he clearly did not expect. It is clear that she played this game on her own terms, and she succeeded 100%. With each new question, the host lost control. He tried again to adopt a tougher tone, hoping that at least one question would make Melania open up, give in to the pressure, but nothing changed. She checked with such an advantage that it seemed that she was not only providing the service, but also managing it during the term. Melania, but wasn't it excruciatingly hard that you weren't asked at such a high level? With this question, he decided to check whether it was still possible to awaken her, even if there was a little weakness in her face. Melania looked at him as if he didn't understand even the most basic things. She answered without moving from her spot, "Why do I need your support when I am confident in myself?" Her words flew like arrows, hitting the target. The host literally froze. He did not expect that it would be so easy to move from his position. But she didn't stop. There was so much power in her eyes that the host felt small and insignificant in her eyes. "You keep trying to get me to play the game, but I don't play by your rules. I didn't come here to please you or explain my actions," she added. That was the key moment. The host, trying to regain some control, almost stuttered. "But don't you think people want to know what you think? They insist that you are not taking part in such an important process." Melania let out a silent breath and replied with a note of weariness in her voice. "What people want and what they really need are two different things. I did what was considered necessary, and I didn't need to be on the front page of the newspaper to feel its value." Melania's words struck the host. He felt himself being pressed more and more. The situation was moving in his direction. He tried to say something again, but everything seemed to have lost its meaning. Melania not only controlled the conversation, she literally wore him down. Her calm and confidence became the qualities that seemed to paralyze him. Melania looked at the host as if he had gone too far. "Do you want to keep trying to convince me? Or are you finally going to admit that I don't need your approval?" she asked, her voice growing firmer. The host, realizing that his actions and manipulations were ineffective, tried to hide his injury. But there was one moment when his desperate attempt turned out to be downright pathetic. "But still, Melania, you had to actually do this. People were waiting," he continued. Melania responded almost with a smile, but there was no doubt in her voice. "I don't have to live up to your expectations. I don't play that game." The silence in the studio was deafening. The host, no longer knowing what he was saying, was silent. His attack only reinforced the effect of her calm. The audience began to understand that this was not a simple interview. This was Melanie's victory, a victory without a complicated scream, without the slightest display of aggression on her part. She was not simply answering questions, she was showing who was really in control here. The audience already felt that this interview was not just a conversation, but a real test for the host. All viewers saw how she skillfully objected to his arguments, and at that moment there was no doubt. Melania is good. Melania Trump wasn't going to stop. Each new question from the host was just another step toward her victory. He, on the other hand, seemed increasingly confused and at a loss. All his efforts had irritated her, but they had accomplished nothing except that she had plunged him deeper into his own mistake. He was trying to regain control, but each answer she gave seemed more perfect, more meaningful. The host, feeling that his position was underfoot, tried to return to his old trick of criticizing her again for her public passivity. But as soon as he began, Melania quickly cut him off. She saw that he was increasingly holding the conversation in his hands and decided it was time to end this game. "You still insist that I be the one you want to see?" she asked, not hiding the irony in her voice. "You don't even understand that publicity isn't everything. I don't need fruitfulness to feel like I'm worth something." Her words hit him like a hammer. The host tried to respond, but his words got stuck in his throat. He was confused, no matter how to continue the conversation. He tried to pause, as if to blow out air, but the silence she left only fueled the tension. The audience, everyone already felt that this moment had become decisive. The host, who had recently thought that he was in control of the situation, now thought that he was at a dead end. His questions were lost in the spring, and Melania's answers were becoming so confident that it seemed that she knew what would happen several steps ahead. "I don't live to please everyone, And I certainly don't live to reinforce your expectations, she continues, not raising her voice. But her words have become even more powerful. The host tried to ask something in response, but his face was already emotionless. He, as if trying to regain some measure of control, gritting his teeth, spoke again. But don't you think it should have been more colorful? Don't you want to be respected for what you did? Melania's answer was quiet, but so clear and meaningful that for a few seconds the studio was dead silent. Respect doesn't come with big titles or words, it comes with actions. And I shouldn't have to justify myself for choosing a different path. These words tore the mask off the host's face. He believed that his arguments had crumbled to dust. He could not live with it. Melania, without raising her voice or losing her composure, simply broke her tactics step by step. He, in turn, did not know how to cope with her cold strength, with her determination, which literally squeezed all his strength. Have you not realized that I don't need to be the center of attention to be independent? She asked again, her voice barely audible in reproach. The host remained silent, no longer trying to argue. He knew that every word she said not only undermined his position, but also called into question everything he had said before. The room could not help but notice, because her calm was not just confident, it was almost destructive. Something tells me I'm not the person you want to argue with any further, she said, smiling but not hiding her superiority. Melania had not only won the conversation, she had brought the situation to the point where the host no longer knew what his face would look like after this broadcast. This was the turning point. The host realized that he would not be able to regain control and that his efforts had already lost all meaning. And all this time, Melania not only remained steadfast, but also made it clear that it was possible to win without resorting to aggression and without losing self-control. When the filming was over, the whole room felt that something incredible had happened. The host sat at the entire table, not yet realizing the depth of his defeat. He was so confused that he did not know how he left the studio with a normal expression on his face. All he could do was remain silent, keeping his eyes on the screen. Melania, as always, remained calm. She stood up, straightened her dress, and slowly walked backstage, leaving behind only shocked silence. The host, despite all his efforts, could not get her mad. Every question, every pressure that increased his only rolled back, reflecting her confidence. He tried to manipulate, to justify her, but Melania seemed to become a wall against which his arguments had no power. He was forced to admit that in this fight there was no winner except her. When the footage aired, no one expected it to become a phenomenon. Melania's interview instantly captured the nation's attention. Social media exploded. Every outlet on the internet began discussing how she held her own despite being taunted by every host in every state. The video clip of her calm but gentle responses went viral in minutes. Many began to rewatch the moment over and over again to understand how she managed to remain so calm when everything around her was trying to destroy her. People admired her resilience and self-confidence. The comments multiplied. She destroyed him. And this has never happened before. Just look at how she carries herself. Each of her answers seemed to deal a blow to the pride of the host, who could not even answer her challenges. But among all the comments offered, there were some that were the most interesting. Users began to analyze that her behavior was not just a reaction to an attack. It was something more. Melania Trump is not just checking questions. She proved that true strength lies not in loud words and actions, but in the ability to remain calm and confident in yourself, despite external pressure. The room where she sat, as well as me, watching the broadcast, understood that this was the turning point. The host was on the verge of a breakdown, and she kept herself together. In this story, the little Trumps, without raising their voices, completely destroyed the host's manipulations and suddenly became popular throughout America. Memes, articles, discussions, the internet just exploded. People began to eagerly wait for what would happen next. All these discussions became evidence that Melania had returned to society, and not as a former first lady, but as a woman who knows how to maintain her position and prove her strength without unnecessary words. As viewers across the country acknowledged their victory, they suddenly realized they had witnessed something significant. This interview wasn't just a meeting between two people. It was the moment when Melania Trump declared that she was not losing her originality, no matter what. With this interview, she gained new respect, and all she did was stay true to herself. After Melania Trump's interview went viral, the country was shocked. Every moment of calm and confidence was singled out for quotations. People who had never known how they got here are now beginning to see it differently. Their answers didn't just set new standards, they began to create forces that don't need civilizations to be great. Melania didn't seek out the noise. She didn't engage in overt terms, didn't shout, and didn't demand attention. But her quiet superiority and ability to hold back her emotions while trying to provoke made her a symbol of the very strength that many warriors, but not all, have been able to achieve. The interview didn't just return to the screens, it cast her in a whole new light. And that new image had nothing to do with her status as First Lady, but with how she was able to outsmart the system and emerge victorious without a complicated shout. Melania knew that her silence at the most tense moment of the interview was the very victory that left the host flustered. He tried the old pressure tactics, but she did not give in. His questions became more hesitant, and her answers became more precise. She showed the world that true strength does not come from shouting and attracting attention, but from remaining composed and calm despite all the noise. Not only did she destroy the host's tactics, but she also set an example for all those who felt undervalued. Melania Trump became a symbol of confidence and resilience. She was able to teach every important lesson. Strength does not need to be read by shouting. It is enough to be yourself, and not to determine your worth better than others. After this interview, the internet was filled with memes and reactions. Commentators wondered how she could be such a powerful achievement of self-sufficiency and independence. People began posting quotes in which she spoke of a strength that does not require external validation. It became a real trend. Her words began to thunder across all corners of the web. As the weeks passed, the moment became even more important. For Melania, this wasn't just another interview. It was a demonstration that she was not just the First Lady, but a woman who would always define her place in this world. Audiences across America began to realize that she was not someone who would conform to the European standard. She did not seek approval. She did not demand recognition. She had already proven that her strength lay in being herself, in doing things on her own terms. And that was where she had won. Melania Trump changed the game. And she did it not with big words, but with quiet confidence. It was the moment when he looked at her in a new way. And that moment is etched in history, like how strength can be hidden behind quiet determination. At the moment when everyone expected Melania to give in, she showed that true strength is calm and confidence. She didn't just answer questions, she completely destroyed the host with his own methods and became a symbol of unbroken will. His manipulation tactics collapsed, and her restraint became a real victory. At that moment, she wasn't just a woman. She realized that true strength isn't in noise, but in fortitude. Melania Trump proved that you can rise above everything and be a winner without giving in to pressure. Don't miss such powerful stories. Subscribe to the channel, like and click the bell to stay up to date with the most exciting events.